go ahead and get started. If things are too loud, let me know. Let me check what's going on with this. Just gonna turn that down a little bit. Come on, why can't I? There we go. I'm gonna turn that down. Turn that down. Okay, can you hear me? Hello? Yes, I think I'm good. Okay. Great. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, guys. Sorry I wasn't here last week. Things came up. I was dealing with applications for PhD programs, and they take a while, so just didn't have the time to hop on stream. Man, this music is loud. Okay, so first thing to do today, Denisovans, or Homo sapiens, who were the first to settle permanently on the Tibetan Plateau. The Tibetan Plateau has long been considered one of the last places to be populated by people in their migration around the globe. A new paper by archaeologists at the University of California, Davis, highlights that our extinct cousins, the Denisovans, reached the roof of the world about 160,000 years ago. That's 120,000 years earlier than previous estimates for our species, and even contributed to our adaptation to high altitude. So let me do this real quick for you. No, I don't want Tibetan restaurant. I want a map. Let's see. Nope. Maybe images. I guess. Over here so you can see it. So here we have the Tibetan Plateau. It's kind of partially in China, partially in some other areas. So yeah, there we go. Now that you know where it's at, we can continue on. The article, which was published online this month in the journal Trends in Ecology and Evolution, suggests that a cross-look at archaeological and genetic evidence provides essential clues to reconstruct the history of peopling of the region. Denisovans were archaic hominins once dispersed throughout Asia. After several instances of interbreeding with early modern humans in the region, one of their hybridizations benefited Tibetans' survival and settlement at high altitudes. Those conclusions are among findings that led Heike Zhang, a UC Davis doctoral student who was participated in excavations of an archaeological site above 15,000 feet in Tibet, and Xingjun Zhang, a postdoctoral researcher at UCLA who studies Denisovan and other human DNA, to ask the question, what do we know about how and when the region was peopled? Xingjun Zhang earned her genetic anthropology doctorate at UC Davis in 2017. The two researchers are not related. I guess they had similar last names. Okay. The two scholars conducted a review of evidence of human dispersal and settlement in the Tibetan Plateau, integrating the archaeological and genetic discoveries so far. Before our article, there was a lack of comprehensive review, bringing both fields together, especially with an equal emphasis. Archaeologist investigations suggest 4 major periods of occupation, beginning with Denisovans about 160,000 years ago, and followed by 3 periods of humans who arrived starting around 40,000 years ago, 16,000 years ago, and 8,000 years ago. Based on archaeological evidence, we know that there are gaps between these occupation periods, but the archaeological work on the Tibetan Plateau is very limited. There's still a possibility of continuous human occupation since the late Ice Age, but we haven't found enough data to confirm it. Denisovans were first identified in 2010 based on DNA extracted from a girl's finger bone found in a cave in the Altai Mountains in Siberia. Her DNA carried the haplotype highly similar to the endothelial PAS1, the EPAS1 gene, which in living populations is known to improve oxygen transport in the blood. Most modern Tibetans carry a high frequency of the EPAS gene. 2019, a jawbone from a cave on the Tibetan Plateau was tentatively identified as Denisovan, but it could not be determined if the mandible carried the same gene. We don't know whether the Denisovans are adaptive to the hypoxia of the Tibetan Plateau at this point. Little is known about the biology and behavior of the Denisovans in the plateau. Genetic studies show that Asians and Oceanians inherited different amounts of Denisovan DNA. Xinjun Zhang said it could mean that the interbreeding happens somewhere in Asia, in the ancestral Asians before the further subdivision of local populations that we see today. Cool. So yeah, the Denisovans, it seems, were in the Tibetan Plateau much longer than humans were. Alright, moving on. Neanderthal babies teethed earlier. A group of researchers, and I bet if we were able to do a lot more archaeological work in the Tibetan Plateau, we could probably find all kinds of crazy stuff. I bet it'd be really cool. Find a lot of Denisovan things. It's definitely a place that we should be looking for it. First hits. Okay. Neanderthal babies teethed early. A group of researchers from Kent University's School of Anthropology and Conservation examined the 5 deciduous or milk teeth of 3 Neanderthals. They specifically studied samples from the Krapina site in Croatia. These are dated to be 120,000 to 130,000 years old. They published their findings in Proceedings of the Royal Society B. Using the state-of-the-art, non-destructive technologies, the team was able to conclude that Neanderthal infants have an accelerated dental development compared to modern human children. Modern humans have a more extended dental development in contrast. This implies that Neanderthals consumed food earlier in life. I think they mean consumed solid food earlier in life. Sea teeth have a layer of enamel or coating over dentin, and that is laid like concentric rings of bark around a tree. Prior research has shown us differences in the size of enamel before birth and after birth. Also, the gaps in the rings indicate the amount of enamel growth in a specific period, such as a day. This is known as the enamel secretion rate. These rings can be used to determine when the teeth erupted. The age of the individual at death and the amount of enamel deposited reflect nutritional status. So, looking at this tooth, we've got a nice imaging of it. So this is enamel, this is dentin. The neonatal line, so it looks like you got a line right here. You can follow that up. And then we're, bam. And then they're saying they were born then. Which tooth is this? KP221. Okay. And then we have here. Okay. I see. Right here, you got another line here. Prenatal extension. tuning of extinction rate. Oh, interesting. Okay. Analysis of the samples with synchrotron radiation computed microtomography led the team to calculate that milk teeth erupted from Neanderthal child's gum between 4 and 7 months of age. In modern humans, on the other hand, deciduous teeth often appear between 7 and 10 months of age. Similar markings were also found on the 3 intact teeth in another Neanderthal jawbone. Interestingly, they found that the deciduous incisors, usually the first teeth to erupt, formed rapidly even before birth and gave them a jump start to erupt sooner. But the molars formed slower in utero and were more consistent with humans. Little, if anything, is known about Neanderthal babies, but we know that Neanderthal kids had large bodies and brains by year 2. The researchers suggest that Neanderthal children may therefore have begun eating solid foods earlier than modern human children, perhaps to fuel their potentially larger builds. So this is actually something studied to determine all kinds of different questions. So the rate of growth through childhood, diet. One looking at humans, one thing that we are very unique in is the length of time it takes us to reach full maturity. We are incredibly slow to fully develop. When you look at our closest relatives, the chimpanzee, they are pretty much full grown at around 12, 14 years old. And humans clearly are not. So knowing how quickly an mammal is layered is different from species to species. So they said in this article a day for each layer of the enamel. That could vary slightly between species. And if that's the case, you can't just count the rings and be like, okay, they are this many days old. Because if it's laid different times, then you're not going to be able to count it the exact same. Also, the teeth will stop growing. We don't constantly lay new enamel. So once that's done, if you live past the age of tooth development, you're not going to be able to say, oh yeah, they were 16 years old when they die, when in fact they were 40 years old. So that's one thing. But if you have a young specimen that passed away at a young age, that could help. And knowing at the rate teeth developed is really important, because you can find a skull, see which teeth are erupted, which ones are formed, how far along they are formed, and get a pretty good estimate on age. Especially the younger ones. So when you're aging a skeleton, you can actually, if they're young children, you can get pretty much like within a few months if it's in really good condition. But when they're fully grown adults, that time span lengthens. So you can guess between a 17 and 24-year-old, or they could probably be a 26 to 53-year-old or something. So the length of time drastically increases because the differences between individuals in age and skeletal remains slows. So dropping race in human genetics. The 19th and 20th century saw an insurgence of racial terms like Negroid and Mongoloid in science to define groups. As a consequence, these terms and the science behind them have perpetuated discrimination against groups of people, i.e. eugenics. And if you've never heard of eugenics, you really should look it up. Very important time, and it was kind of a global thing, but it really gives you an idea of the U.S. because school can point a lot of fingers on things like eugenics and medical like tests and just kind of outright wrong racial medical ideas with like the Nazis and everything, but the US was doing it too, so look it up. Eugenics, very interesting time. The biological basis of racial categories has since been debunked thoroughly. We now understand more biological variation exists within groups than amongst or between groups. Therefore, race is a social construct. So that one kind of confuses people, I find, that variations within a group compared to between groups. And if, let me see, how can I explain that? If you have a group, and the group of things has different shapes, so you've got circles and squares, rectangles, diamonds, hearts, we'll go with, and it has blue and purple colors. Then another group has diamonds, hearts, squares, and rectangles, so they don't have the triangles, but they too have purple and blue, but they also have green in them. So that in the group they have a lot more variation going on because they have that green and they've got the hearts, whereas the first group has pretty much the exact same thing as the second group. Just about. I think I said one more shape that the first group has that the second doesn't. But there's a lot more similarities between those groups than individually looking at those groups. That's what I mean. That's what that is talking about. That these two groups are more alike than because of the variation within those groups. Over time, the scientific community is changing its tone to keep up with the shift. Of the 11,635 papers published from 1949 to 2018 in the American Journal of Human Genetics, the term race appeared in over 22% of their publications in the first decade. Specifically, terms like Negro were used in 21% of papers and Caucasian in 12% of papers in the journal's first 10 years. Now the use of the term race has now declined to 4% of papers in the last decade. Moreover, fewer than 1% of current papers now use Negro or Caucasian. This decrease in frequency reflects how scientific community is responding. In lieu of racial terms of the past, new terms like ethnicity and ancestry are used to describe groups of people. In fact, labels such as African, Asian, and European have increased by 18%, 14%, and 42% respectively in the last 10 years. This rapid increase in these terms is more esoteric and ambiguous, but these terms and the ones from the past are still published and cannot be taken away. Well, you wouldn't want to destroy that information, just be able to point out that it's not exactly correct. It is extremely challenging not to use any term in describing populations of people, and even more challenging is control of the message. In other words, the public's perception of what the findings mean, but we're addressing that too. For example, the American Society of Human Genetics, the society behind the AJHG, has started a project to investigate the impact of injustices perpetuated by terms used in genetic publications. Others have published a committee, such as the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, to evaluate how race impacts health disparities. Some are experimenting with anti-racist language in genetic publications. I personally welcome these advances. Understanding our trends in language and how it affects the public as a whole is a responsible step. Taking it further and seeing how it's impacting injustice, medicine, and making steps to prevent it from occurring again is commendable. Unfortunately, though, I just do not know what the right language is to use to describe groups of humans. Well, that's a difficult question, right? You might end up insulting somebody Does anyone out there have their own thoughts to share on how to describe human populations? The terms will change, and I'm sure the terms that we utilize today are going to be seen as insensitive or even bigoted in the future. It is something that is constantly changing. Language, it's never stagnant, and what we do today is going to affect the future. So that's one reason that it's actually excellent knowing how our writing is affecting the general population and what may be developing culturally from it. I think scientists most definitely have a responsibility of what their work does. It can be hard to control it, especially when it comes into like popular sciences. Alright, detailed analysis of the Laetoli footprints indicate multiple species of bipedal hominins. An adjacent site also had footprints, site A. In fact, they were I completely skipped that. The oldest unequivocal evidence of bipedal hominins to date is the 3.7 million year old footprints discovered at Laetoli, Tanzania in 1978. Let me look at that for you. Map. Let me get the correct picture for you. So we have Tanzania, which if you don't know where Tanzania is, it's kind of near the Horn of Africa right here. So a nice big area, and then we have Laetoli, and it borders Kenya. I'm sure you guys have heard of that, and Rwanda, Burundi. So there we go, up in the Congo. Okay, so that's where it's at. Specifically, the footprints from sites G and S are generally accepted as members of Australopithecus afarensis. You know the species of the famous partial skeleton Lucy. An adjacent site also had footprints, site A. In fact, they were discovered 2 years before site G and S, but they were so different that they were dismissed. Some researchers hypothesized they were made by an upright young bear walking on its hind legs because they looked so different from footprints from the other sites. That is, until the authors of this new study looked more closely. In June of 2019, the scientists of this current Nature published study re-excavated 5 consecutive footprints. They measured, photographed, and 3D scanned these footprints. They teamed up with people who run a bear center and performed a comparative anatomical study of the Laetoli site A tracks to the footprints of black bears, chimpanzees, and humans. So did they, get a bear and make it walk upright? Give it little treats? A little picnic basket? Analyzing impressions of the footprints, they were able to find some differences. First, the heels of the bear taper. Bear toes and feet are fan-like. Chimpanzees also have relatively narrow heels compared to their forefoot. But the Laetoli footprints, including those at Site A, have wide heels relative to their forefoot. Secondly, Site A's footprints also contain the impressions of a big toe and a smaller second digit. The size difference between the two digits is something we see in apes, like humans and chimpanzees, but not black bears. Lastly, after recording over 50 hours of bears walking, the team observed bears spent less than 1% of that time bipedal. They concluded it is unlikely a bear could have been upright for the length and duration seen at Site A. The summation of these differences demonstrates that the footprints were likely made by a hominin moving on 2 legs. But in comparing the Laetoli footprints at Site A and the inferred foot proportions, morphology, and likely gait, so like how far apart the feet and stepping, how far they can step. Results reveal that the Site A footprints are distinct from those of Australopithecus afarensis at Site G and S. We've known since the 70s that the Site A prints were different. We just did not have a detailed study like this to say they are a different hominin and not a different mammal. Just which other species of bipedal hominin from 3.7 million years ago is a question for another day. Of course it's another day. I want to know, who could it have been? That's so cool. 2 different hominins walking in the similar area, leaving footprints. Is cool. I mean, some of these footprints show children playing, you know? I want to know who this one was. Did they meet? Probably. Were they friends? Did they kill each other? I don't know. This is interesting stuff. Anyways, moving on. I'm going to actually skip this because I don't know about you guys, but I just kind of tired today. I'm tired today. I'm gonna be honest, I'm tired. It's gonna be a short day. Short stream. Okay, so we've got some good old memes. I love some of these. They're funny. I found them. Someone decided to do a, what do you call it? Entire, string of messages, and people gave their favorite scientific memes. So, let's go through these. And since we're here, you can follow me on my Twitter. We've got Bones of Amber, or at Amber Bones. And then I also have my Discord, which I think I'm going to actually have a movie playing here soon. I kind of want to do something with Christmas if I can, and if I can link anthropology in with Christmas, I will. Maybe some type of documentary, I don't know, we'll see. So yes, definitely join. It should be in, I don't think I did that. I left it, didn't I? I did, wrong title. Let me edit that real quick. Okay. Yeah, I'll put that in the description later, so. Ooh, I think I misspelled that. Hold on. Yeah, I did. It's with an I. And an A. Of course I misspelled it. Oh, I did that right. It's just that one. There we go. If you guys didn't know, I am a horrible speller. Spell check on the computer is my closest friend, and without it, I probably would have failed massively in life. Anyways, this one, the paper I'm currently reading, and paper cited in paper I'm currently reading. I don't know if you guys have ever gone down that rabbit hole, but yes, it is something I tend to write it down and be like, you can't go to that right now, you gotta finish this paper. And it's hard, because once you see that and you're like, I want to follow that, the focus on the current task at hand kind of dwindles. Alright. Oh, let's see who's been sabotaging my experiments. It's myself. Why do you stay at your job if it's that bad? This creature has adapted to the crushing pressure and oppressive darkness. That's actually dark and sad, but funny. Reading the articles I've saved, collecting more articles to read later, and this applies to books as well. And this one's just sad. So adamant, this grad student isn't being paid a livable wage. See, nobody cares. That one hurts. That one hurts. Alright, last one. I bet he is thinking about other women. What is a species? Okay, so I want to switch this. Because I think about that, you know? That's my job and everything. But, yeah, it's what is a species? What are the characteristics? How do we define this box? And yeah, it's not so cut dry, because then you end up with things like ligers. Anyways, okay, we can do one more. Bison in Canada discover ancient petroglyphs. Oh, this was interesting. Well, the title was interesting, so I want to see it. Fulfilling an indigenous prophecy. The elders of the Wahpeton Dakota Nation had long prophesied that the return of the plains bison to their ancestral lands would portend a welcome turn of events for Canada's First Nations peoples. They may not have known, however, that it would take just 8 months for this prediction to come true. In December 2019, officials at Wanuskewin Heritage Park in the province of Saskatchewan reintroduced bison to the region more than a century after the animals were hunted to near extinction. The following August, the herd's hooves uncovered 4 petroglyphs, or rock carvings, and an accompanying tool used to create the ancient artworks. The elders used to tell us when the bison came back, that's when there will be a good change in our history, says Wahpeton Dakota Elder Cy Standing. We've been down a long time, but it feels like we are starting the way up. The herd's hooves uncovered 4 ancient petroglyphs. I'm not sure what I'm looking at. Archaeologist Ernie Walker and bison manager Craig Thongs made the find last summer while visiting the park. They were standing near a wallow or vegetation-free spot where the bison give themselves dust baths, when Walker noticed a grooved rock protruding from the ground. Assuming the cut was from tool damage, he brushed away the dirt, only to expose another groove and then another. They were all parallel, all symmetrical, he says. It was at that point I realized this was actually what is known as a petroglyph. This was intentionally carved. The 550-pound boulder turned out to be a ribstone, so called because it's engraved with motifs that represent bison ribs. Researchers found 3 more carvings over the ensuing weeks, a larger stone with a grid pattern, a small specimen with pits and grooves, and a 1,200-pound boulder covered in lines. Then, most surprisingly of all, the stone knife used to carve the petroglyphs resurfaced. Wanuskewin, a National Historic Site that stands on land once occupied by indigenous peoples, announced the find last week, dated to between 300 and 1,800 years ago, with a probable age of around 1,000 years old. The carvings represent the first petroglyphs discovered at this 600-acre site. Oh, look at a little baby bison. From the spot where the petroglyphs were found, it's a straight 380-yard shot across the Saskatchewan grassland to the edge of some of the steepest cliffs that line the park's Opimiha Creek Valley, formed about 7,000 years ago after the recession of the Wisconsin Glacier. The 130 to 160-foot drop from the lip of the surrounding prairie to the valley bottom was identified by nomadic indigenous peoples as an ideal buffalo jump, or precipice used in hunting. The site would go on to attract almost every pre-European contact group in the region. For thousands of years, Blackfoot, Cree, Ojibwa, Assiniboine, Nakota, and Dakota people on the trail of migrating bison found sustenance and shelter at the fertile confluence of the South Saskatchewan River, the Opimiha Creek. They left behind ample evidence of habitation projectile points, bone and stone tools, gaming pieces, personal adornments, and other Europeans and Metis arrived in the region as part of the fur trade in the 1860s. Metal implements including gun cartridges and a strike light. Everybody was here at some point, says Walker, at the site. Almost continuous 6,000-year occupation. Then came Treaty 6, an 1876 agreement between the English Crown and indigenous representatives that opened up the land for white settlement by promising every indigenous family of 5 1 square mile of land. After its passage, First Nations people were, of course, moved off to reserves away from their traditional nomadic migration routes. Walker adds, around the same time, hunting decimated the local bison population, leaving no bison in Canadian wild by 1888, according to Wildlife Conservation Society. Okay, so this treaty, they said, okay, let us settle here and we'll give you a square mile for every family of 5, which is kind of a shit deal. But they agreed to it, and it seems they didn't get it in the fine writing of where that square mile was, I'm assuming. Or did the Crown just be like, yeah, you signed it, bye. I don't know. I'd have to read the treaty. With the bison and people gone, the land that now forms the park became a small, privately owned ranch and homestead inhabited by white settlers. So the bison ribstone is now on display at the park's interpretive center. So you got scrapes here. They said it's to represent bison ribs, and they have multiple. So I'm assuming they had it there. They'd be like, hey, you're getting close to the cliff. This is a good spot. You gotta have dinner. Stone knife used to carve the newly discovered petroglyphs. Nice. Think in the, that's not as clear here, but over here it looks like you can get the shapes coming into it where it was mapped a bit. So here, oh, this is a much better one. You can see how deep those gouges in are a bit better here. Oh, that one's all scratchy up. So, yeah, that's cool. Interesting. Bison herds coming back out. That's awesome, honestly. Bringing them back in. Yep. Okay, the 10 best history books of 2021. This shall be the final article of the day. After 2020 brought the most devastating global pandemic in a century and a national reckoning with systemic racism ushered in a number of development. Okay, we're done. I don't care. Just tell me the books. For Lost Cities, A Secret History of the Urban Age. Covered with Night, A Story of Murder and Indigenous Justice in Early America. Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty. Until I Am Free, Fannie Lou Hamer's Enduring Message to America. Into the Forest, A Holocaust Story of Survival, Triumph, and Love. The Man Who Hated Women, Sex, Censorship, and Civil Liberties in the Gilded Age. African Europeans, An Untold History. The Eagles of Heart Mountain, A True Story of Football, Incarceration, and Resistance in World War II America. About Time, A History of Civilization in 12 Clocks. What? Oh, History of Timekeeping and How It Shaped the World. America on Fire, The Untold History of Police Violence and Black Rebellion since the 1960s. I don't know if it's untold. I think most people are aware of the conflict. But, I don't know, maybe it addresses it in a different, take. I don't know. I didn't read the description. So those are the 10 best history books of 2021 according to the Smithsonian Magazine. Alright. That was, oh, yeah, we did this one. We did that one. Alright. We're done. I'm done for the day. I just kind of need to relax. I've been doing a lot of excavation out in the field, and it is getting cold, which makes work a little bit harder, because you carry more layers, or you shiver and get tired that way. Anyways, it was nice having you guys here. I hope you enjoyed all the articles. If you have any questions, let me know, and just send them through, you know? This is live for a reason. I want people to interact and everything. I'm really trying to get numbers up. Things have been slow, but we'll see. Hopefully we'll get a few more followers in. So yes, tell your friends, family, anybody who may be interested in this stuff, which I find there's a lot of people. A lot of people find archaeology interesting. It's the monotony of the day-to-day tasks that people may not find interesting. But anyways, join me on Twitter, join me in Discord, and we will all have a grand old time. I'm probably going to start movies back up soon, because I really enjoyed that, and I kind of fell out doing that. So yes, have a good day, everybody.